settled here. One more mayor.
Forgive me.
Well, got this. Sorry, we can keep adjusting it. Welcome, everyone. I'm Fritz Mayer, Dean of the Korbel School. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this afternoon, almost evening program on local level collaboration from crisis to opportunity, which is sponsored by the Scrivner Institute of Public Policy here at the Korbel School. And it's just a great pleasure to welcome you, and particularly to welcome this extraordinary panel of mayors. I won't introduce them all. They probably, many of them need no introduction now. I'll leave that to my successors. But before we get started, let me do what we do here for public events, which is to acknowledge that we are meeting on the land that it was the ancestral home of the Cheyenne and Arapaho, and indeed the Ute Nations in Colorado. And we acknowledge the painful history of this university, of this city, of this region, and honor the contributions that have been made and continue to be made by Native American communities. Well, we are thrilled to be hosting this event. Really a core mandate of the Scrivner Institute is to be a hub, an interdisciplinary hub for conversations on policy, both here on the DU campus and then in the wider community, in the local community. It's unusual to have a school of, or an institute of public policy embedded in a school of international affairs, but it's really a kind of unique opportunity because we can think not just globally, has been the tradition at the Korbel School, but the ways in which these global issues manifest themselves and play out at the local level. Because this is where, cities are where things are really happening, where issues like climate change or economic inequality or social justice, the great issues of the world indeed play out at the city level. And of course, metro areas like Denver are where a lot of things are happening, where there's a lot of policy innovation, invention, historically more pragmatic, a little less buffeted by political winds, although maybe not completely so these days. And so, for us here at the Korbel School, the city is an important aspect. It's sort of the place where the global and local collide or connect. And that's one of the reasons we're really building urban policy as a core strength of the Scrivner Institute and the public policy curriculum here at the University of Denver. Always trying to ground not only the global and the local, but the local and the global, to see all those connections. Well, so it's a particular privilege and honor for me to welcome all of you and this really quite remarkable group of mayors here this evening for a conversation about policy collaboration in the Denver metro area. I hope this is the first of many such conversations. My congratulations to Professor Nazneen Barma, who's director of the Scrivner Institute, who'll be introduced formally in a moment, but to you and I think to Linda Olson and to others who've organized this event. So welcome all of you. Now it's my particular pleasure to introduce the Chancellor of the University of Denver, Dr. Jeremy Haefner, who we're just delighted that you're here today. And I know he shares a similar commitment to these kinds of conversations that really bring together the University of Denver with the community. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here with us.
Thank you, Fritz, and welcome everyone. I am delighted to be here and really excited to listen to this wonderful panel of mayors from the Metro Denver area. Fritz, I like your comments about local and global because I think that is the spirit by which the University of Denver is really charting a course forward. We know we have to think globally, but act locally. And many of the issues that we're dealing with, including carbon neutrality, is really in that vein. And we're excited to think about it in those terms. So glad to see that the Korbel School is leading this conversation with with that kind of framework in mind. Again, welcome to all of you, faculty, staff, and students. And this is also being cast and streamed live, so the virtual audience is also very much welcome. We appreciate your attendance today. A very special welcome to our guests, Mayor Beiter-Fluhr, Mayor Hancock, Mayor Millet, Mayor Olsen, and Mayor Paul. Of course, they'll be formally introduced in just a moment here or two by our moderator, who I'd like to also thank, Professor Nazneen Barma, the director of the Scrivner Institute as well. The Scrivner Institute is making this possible, and we're so excited and honored to have the Douglas and Mary Scrivner Institute of Public Policy in the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies. Dean Meyer really gave the context of why this is an exciting place for the Public Policy Institute to be in a College of International Studies. There are just great opportunities for the University of Denver to shine because the Scrivner Institute is here. And one of its roles is to serve as this convener and hub. This is especially important during these times of the COVID pandemic, of which we still find ourselves struggling through, especially in Colorado, especially in Denver right now. And to think that this is an opportunity for collaboration is really what we need to see at the local level and at the global level. And you're going to have that theme throughout tonight's conversation as well. I just want to end by emphasizing one last important piece, and you're going to see this throughout the conversation. This is going to be a great example of civil discourse at its best. A few weeks ago, we were fortunate enough to entertain Mayor Hancock, Senator Hickenlooper, and former Mayor Webb to reminisce about their times in leading the city of Denver. It was clear that collaboration was a huge part of their friendship and their collegiality, but it was also clear that they had a sense of civil discourse and how important it was in their leadership. Today's panel, I'm sure, will reflect this. This is an issue that we all face. It's an issue that we face at the University of Denver and why we're tackling it head on. The notion of how we cross differences, how we listen across differences, how we embrace the art of persuasion as opposed to the art of shouting is at the core of an important set of competencies we want our students to have. So I'm so pleased to see this kind of event take place. So to the Corbell School of International Studies, thank you. To the Scrivner Institute for Public Policy, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Dr. Barma.
Thank you so much, Chancellor Hafner and Dean Meyer, for those wonderful comments. Setting the context for this wonderful panel, which I'm honored to be up here on the stage with. I'm going to read your illustrious bios so that everybody knows who you are. We have Mayor Tara Beiter-Fluhr here from Sheridan, who has served as the mayor of Sheridan, Colorado since 2016 and previously as a council member for Ward 3 for 9 years. She moved to Colorado with her husband Troy in 1996 to complete an MA in international politics here at the Corbell School at the University of Denver. Welcome back. Tara is a certified public accountant and works full-time as a tax manager in addition to her mayoral duties. Mayor Michael B. Hancock is serving his third term as Denver's 45th mayor and is the second African-American to hold the position. He is a member of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, where he chairs the Communications and Transportation Committee, is vice president of the National Conference of Democratic Mayors, and is a member of the African-American Mayors Association. Raised in Denver since he was 10 months old, Mayor Hancock found his passion and purpose in serving the city and the people he loves. Equity is the foundation of his public service and the intention that drives his leadership. He earned a BA from Hastings College and a Master of Public Administration from University of Colorado, Denver. And his bio specifically notes that he is a diehard Denver Broncos fan. We also have with us today, and forgive me for my shuffling, Mayor Jackie Millet from Lone Tree, who is a dynamic leader with a strong record of regional consensus building and collaboration in the transportation sector. solutions-oriented with demonstrated achievement in a highly political, complex, and transparent environment, which we'll be discussing today. Mayor Millet is a licensed professional engineer and elected official with a unique perspective in evaluating, designing, and implementing productive engagement with constituents, business leaders, and state and federal officials and legislators in the Denver metro area. Mayor Linda Olson of Englewood, I must credit with being really the brainchild of this event. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, Mayor Olson. So thank you so much for helping us to get this together and for the wonderful idea. Mayor Olson is a professor by day and a mayor by night. She has filled many roles here at DU since 2000. She's currently a teaching professor and a director of a DU program that delivers a civically engaged leadership minor to some 300 undergraduate students. Civic engagement has been a core value in Linda's professional and private life. In 2009, she ran and won the city council seat for District 2 of Englewood. And she served 12 years there, serving 2 as a mayor pro tem and 4 most recently as mayor. Most recently, Mayor Olson has been focusing on the challenges related to affordable housing and those experiencing homelessness. And in her free time, if she isn't traveling, her bio says she sleeps. And last but not least, Mayor Adam Paul here from Lakewood, Lakewood, Colorado native. Mayor Paul has dedicated his life to public service to give back to the community that has given him so much. Mayor Paul was elected to a second term as mayor in 2019. While mayor, he's focused on building community collaborations among faith partners, service clubs, and those serving the hungry as a way to increase the impact of the work that they do. Mayor Paul previously chaired the Metro Mayor's Caucus, which we will be discussing today, and holds a BA in political science from the University of Colorado. His belief that the small businesses are the backbone of the community guides his work in the mayor's office, along with a focus on how empathy and compassion must inform public policy decisions at every level. Again, it's such a tremendous honor to be here with you all. And I have to say that I'm a little bit cooler in the eyes of my 8-year-old daughter today than I was yesterday, because I get to share the stage with you today. So thank you so much for that boost. We have a live stream audience, as Chancellor Hafner mentioned. And I will also say that we had anticipated having more people join us here today. And we've heard from probably 10, 20, 30 people today that they changed their registration to the live stream because they were concerned about COVID. And this was really the kind of the initial context that got us thinking about how to kind of focus on this panel when Mayor Olson and I first started talking about this. I want to remind everyone, I'm going to moderate a conversation for about 40 minutes, and then we'll turn to a Q&A with the audience. There are note cards available at the front desk and in the back with my colleague, Katie Aker, who's the program manager of the Scrivner Institute, and without whom we would not be here today. So thank you to Katie and the Corbell team for getting us all here today. Let me start out with a question just on local kind of collaborative context to begin with. And what we sort of agreed to do was that I direct a few questions to a couple of you to begin with, and then we can all just chime in and have a conversation as makes sense. But Mayor Millet and Mayor Beiter-Fluhr, if I may start with you, I'd like to ask you to describe sort of what the ecosystem of local collaboration has looked like in Denver, in the Metro Denver area, both in terms of formal and informal partnerships. When we first talked, you emphasized the genesis in particular of the Metro Caucus, the Mayor's Metro Caucus. And I'd like to hear, I think everybody would, what successes it has enjoyed and how unique that sort of local regional governance structure is in the context of American public policy.
Okay, do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Since you know Metro Mayor's best.
Okay. So the Metro Mayor's Caucus started in 1993, and it brought 40 mayors together. And the first issue that they really tackled was really the light rail. And there's a very famous Denver Post headline that said something along the lines of 40 mayors, Trump one governor, because that was really the mayors coming together saying, we need this regional transit solution that is going to actually drive the development, the businesses, and the residential growth that we think is important for the success of our region. So it started with a very lofty goal and a huge win, frankly. Now, while we continue to struggle with the execution of that vision of light rail, and I don't want to get into that because we want to talk about collaboration. What we know for sure is that the mayors all saw that vision and recognized that vision. And those mayors that were at that table in 1993 have been replaced by 38 mayors that come together. Pre-COVID, we met formally 6 times a year. It's a nonpartisan group. It's a voluntary organization. We do pay dues to pay the staff, one of the really shining lights of it has been, we've had a staff member, our executive director has been with the organization since day one. And it really is a culture of collaboration, frank, open dialogue. Again, we tackle issues that make a difference regionally, but then we also are a peer support group. It's been a challenging 20 months and it continues to be. And mayors have been in an interesting space in these last 20 months. And I think the local leadership, I could not be more proud of, that has been represented. We'll get into more specifics on that. But the Metro Mayor's Caucus really handles two primary issues since day one: housing and transportation. And those are kind of the bread and butter of the organization, and we think make a difference on regional collaboration. Before I pause and turn it over to Tara, I want to just speak about Denver region in general and collaboration. So currently I am the chair of the Metro Mayor's Caucus. I was also the chair of the Denver Regional Council of Governments about 4 or 6 years ago. And those are two tables that elected officials come together to really try and solve the problems facing our community. And I think they're important. But beyond that, SCFD, it has done more for collaboration in our region than anything I can think of. And I would also suggest that our educational institutions have also played an important role in collaboration with us as well. So, Tara.
Sure. Well, you covered some of the formal ones. Maybe I'll talk about some of the more informal ones. I mean, we have in the South Metro area, we have the Tri-Cities organization, which brings together Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. And we had our genesis with the shared transportation issue as well along Santa Fe Boulevard, and that kind of rethinking what that would look like. And we continue to work together today. And we've most recently been tackling homelessness in our region. And I'm sure Mayor Olsen can chime in a little more on that, since she's the one who was leading us. And we'll be sad to miss, we'll be missing her leadership coming up here. But that's one of the, I guess we don't really have like a charter, or, there's no formal organization to that. It's just the Tri-Cities is just our 3 cities get together. We talk about what issues that overlap, and we try to think of solutions. And it's also become a forum for other groups that want to reach out to our area, and that's, for example, CDOT came to us and said, we want to do what do they call that? The environmental linkages study along Santa Fe again,
strange name for it, but
and so, it's a way that they can reach a larger audience. And I think that's another benefit of, for example, Metro Mayors, is that it's a bringing all the mayors together gives people that we want to get information from a combined forum to address everyone. They don't have to go out to every city and go to a council meeting, every night for a year to get their message out. They can come to one stop and get us all.
And also for our legislators, I should have mentioned that over half of the state's population is represented by the 38 mayors that sit at the Metro Mayor's Caucus. So one of the other things we do is very much engage with the state legislature.
one thing, and maybe Mayor Paul, you can address this, but I think different parts of the metro area outside of Denver have smaller groups of mayors that meet and join together to do things. And then we'll maybe jump in with Denver sometimes, but Mayor Beiter-Fluhr and I are on a 6-member, it's very informal. We meet every month with 6 mayors of Littleton, Sheridan, Greenwood Village, Cherry Hills Village, and Englewood.
I've been known to crash, I'm just saying.
she has been known to crash, and it's always fun when we've done that. But we just had ours today. It was my last
just
one
lunch,
because I'm
yeah.
term limited off. So my last day is Monday night next week. But during that time, a lot of things happen. You know that when you're in your workspace outside of the meeting, lots of things happen in the hallway. And we go to a different city each month and have lunch together. And Tara hosted us today, but today was more of thinking about the election that just happened last week and everybody's woes or happiness, and most people are pretty happy.
Yeah.
But that helps with relationship building when you have that kind of, you've had lunch together, how to call them up and, and ask them, hey, could we do this together? Or what are you doing about this issue in your city that we haven't thought of before? And Tara and I have done a number of things together because of that.
Yeah.
Mayor Hancock, Mayor Paul, Dad here.
I think that infrastructure, this infrastructure, the ecosystem, is what allows our region to be very competitive. Because the reality is when we look from our region to the global competitive, the global marketplace, we don't compete as cities, we compete as regions. And that's really how the global marketplace sees us. There's a famous memory that I'll have, the late Mayor Hogan of Aurora and I went up on a helicopter ride. And, you know, the history between Denver and Aurora is kind of like the Hatfield and McCoys, except the two of us. I mean, we enjoy some great whiskey together. That helps relationships, great deal. And Mayor Hogan and I took this out, not while we were drinking whiskey, but we took this helicopter ride. And one morning, and he looked at me, he says, "Do you notice something?" And I looked down, I said, "No, what are you talking about?" He says, "You can't tell the difference between Denver and Aurora." And he says, "That's how we ought to be working together." And I think that ecosystem, that this infrastructure, how it has allowed us to do some amazing things. Fast Tracks is one of them. But we cannot forget in Power Field, where the Broncos play, is a regional partnership that built that. Excuse me, not the Coors Field, where the Rockies play, is a regional partnership that has allowed us to do some things as a region and bring Major League Baseball to our region that at times it was inconceivable that we would have regional, that we would have Major League Baseball. So, and then we think about safety beyond transportation. We think about homelessness. We all recognize, you know, people who are experiencing homelessness, they don't acknowledge boundaries. They look where they get services. And so if they can walk into Sheridan, you know, or Denver, or you know, Englewood or Lakewood, they'll do that to get the services that they need, not respective of where they stand. They need services. Denver today works with Sheridan, we work with Englewood to provide fire service. So these are the kind of things
And
that
we
allow
thank
us
you
to.
for that.
Yes, we thank you for it as well. But it, you know, it doesn't make sense for us to be right next to each other, right? And we can be there just as quickly as your firefighters. We share the cost, we share the burden. We would probably have to go over anyway if there was a massive challenge. So it's the infrastructure helps us a great deal.
And it's pretty unique in that when you look at the metro region, we go from Netherland, from Boulder, all the way down to Lone Tree and Castle Pines, Castle Rock. So you have a very interesting dynamic of different kind of, if you really pulled it out, red and blue communities that come together as one, and there's 38 of us. And a lot of times you probably wouldn't know where people stood in their political world, because we're here, you know, to look at these really important issues: homelessness, affordable housing, transportation, the things that really are the core of local government. We call it, we joke, police, parks, potholes. Right? That's really what we're here to do. And we're here to, you know, try to make that. And also the unique thing of collaboration is when you work together, you can ease suffering on much greater scale. And that's, I think, a really beautiful piece of this group. And we have folks come from all over the country to learn, how do we work together as a region? How does Metro Mayor's Caucus survive and thrive? We also don't make ourselves known all that often. So our state legislators, they know when they hear from a group of 38 mayors, it's pretty important.
Yeah.
And so we don't weigh in on a lot of issues, but when we do, we really bring full house and are able to make some effective change.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think one of the things that that set of comments really brings out for me is I'm a scholar of international relations, but when you talk about sort of local policy and local level collaboration, this is where innovation happens in some ways, because it's where people are actually living their lives, right? Where kind of these problems, as you've noted, have no boundaries, and the solutions have to come in terms of that pragmatic approach. Something that else that we've all learned all too recently has no boundaries is a global pandemic. And this was, in a sense, the genesis of the idea of this event when Linda and I first talked about this, to kind of talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic in particular, and the evolution of the federal government's and state governments' responses to the pandemic created openings and the need for concerted local governance. And so would be really interested in hearing, and perhaps starting with you, Mayor Hancock and Mayor Olsen, your views on what you think vis-a-vis the pandemic successes have been achieved via local level collaboration because of sort of the gaps that state and federal responsive might have left.
Well, you want me to go first?
Yeah, please do.
You know,
You were the big decision maker that moved things along on this.
Well, I think it's important for people to remember. We got to go back. We almost forget almost 2 years ago what was going down. Right? I mean, we had to shut cities down. We had to send people home, close schools. we were fighting something we couldn't see, smell, touch. And none of us understood what the heck it was, right? But people were dropping dead from it. And it was a scary time. And we had to make decisions almost in the dark, and you had to figure it out on the way through. I can tell you about regionalism, and I'm so proud to be a part of this region. And I mean that sincerely, because we talked regularly via Zoom, obviously, about some key decisions we had to make. And the difference, and a lot of people don't understand, if you study local government, we come in different forms. You have straw mayor, you have council manager form of government, and you have commission type form of government. And we represent all those different forms of government. So decision points are different depending on the type of government you come from. And what you saw was Denver lean in, and then you saw the region follow, and then the state follow. Well, Denver didn't lean in without knowing what our state partners were going to do. We knew the decisions we needed to make, and we also knew where they were in terms of their decision making. And so we leaned in. The next day you would see the region move in, and then the state follow. I was so proud to stand with the mayors and county commissioners and public health officials from the region, because though we didn't know what we were battling at the time, we were learning our ability to communicate with one another and ability to kind of vet our decision-making and say, this is where we need to go, and agree. We would try to push the governor. We understood he had a whole different constituency he had to deal with, but we made decisions that we felt were in the best interest of the people we represented, not respective of politics or party. It was about saving our people. And we did that. And this is why I was proud to stand with this region.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think it's one of the proudest times for me on the Metro Mayor's Caucus for being involved, is to see how we worked during the very beginning. It was very hard. I think we were all so anxious, and some of us knew people who were dying that were our constituents, family members of people we knew as well. And my city manager lost both of his parents. And we have a strong manager form of government in Englewood. So we're dealing with this grief of our highest level of leader in our city. So it was a very hard time. We were all going through it at the same time. But one of the things that I think that helped was the Metro Mayor's Caucus was already in place, so we could use that vehicle, although we'd only met every other month up until that time. This is like a group that only meets, 6 times a year. All of a sudden we started calling each other once a week. And then we went to twice a week, I think. And then we had executive meetings in between. Jackie and Adam and I are on the executive committee. But one of the things that became really important is side conversations. So I remember when Mayor Hancock decided they were going to go ahead and mask, all the rest of us said, well, you go up in a helicopter, you can't see the difference between Aurora and Englewood and Denver. So what is that going to do if the rest of us don't? And then it comes down to the health department. And so Denver's health department is Denver, the city and county of Denver. But for me and for Tara and for others, we're all in a county, or we're in a tri-county health system, which will be one more year together. And then thanks to Douglas, we're having a major divorce. But so what we had to do was figure out within our county who all was going to be in this. And I remember the health department, or Dr. Douglas calling me and saying, I need one more mayor besides you to feel comfortable to get my board to vote yes. And he said, can you get Mayor Kaufman? And I said, well, I was just on a call with him this morning. And he said, if the county decides we're going to do a mask mandate, he'll do one. And he said, well, he hasn't told me that. I need him to say that. So I called up Mike Kaufman and got him right away, thank heavens, and said, are you serious about what you said this morning? And he said, yeah, what do I need to do? And I said, just call up John Douglas and tell him you're in. And that's what he did. And then the whole thing went. And it was that kind of relationship and capitalizing on, Mike and I are very different in our thinking about things, but on this, it was clear, and it was good enough to call each other and say, now he tweeted it before he called John Douglas and it went out. And I thought, if I tweeted anything, nothing would happen. I don't know if you knew that. You tweeted it before, and then it was done. It was done.
Would anybody else, Mayor Millet, Mayor Beiter-Fluhr, like to comment on this?
Well, I think COVID certainly brought the public health conversations very much front and forward with Metro Mayor's Caucus, but it was also, again, the reopening of our businesses conversation that also happened, and how could we safe and effectively do that, and what policies and practices that were we going to be putting in place? What were commonalities that we all were going to employ? And then what were some tweaks? Now, there are communities in the Metro Mayor's Caucus that never had a mask mandate in place. There are some that did. There are some communities that had businesses that tried to stay open in the midst of COVID and kind of against public health guidance. And it was a very challenging time to sit at to sit across a Zoom window, and maybe it was better we were in Zoom in that space, but with mayors dealing with these very different issues. But what the caucus provided, I feel like, is a safe place to talk about it, even if you vehemently disagreed with the actions that someone else was taking. I think the ability to vehemently disagree and still maintain cordial, I can still like you and disagree with you. And that is something that I feel like we've lost in government, but it's not lost in the Metro Mayor's Caucus. So I think we struggled. You're here. No, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that is something that we all, and particularly the mayors sitting alongside me up here, I think really push toward maintaining that culture with the Metro Mayor's Caucus. So, but I think opening of our businesses was not, let's, to turn a sunnier page, that was also a very important part of our convening and getting together and speaking. And I would say our access, again, to the governor's office, to the governor joined calls a number of times to talk to us about decision-making that he was going to be contemplating and asking for our input. Our public health advisors joined us a number of times on those calls, and safely reopening, and even our liquor licensing. Who fell in love with taking liquor to go? Never in my life did I think that was going to be a real thing. And the Lone Tree Police Department had to tell the people that you can't drink it in the parking lot outside of Harry's. This is a group of moms who are super smart, brought their lawn chairs, they got their margaritas, and they thought, this is it. They're like, you can't do that. Okay. But all joking aside, I think there are other really important things that happened, and I'd love to hear Tara and Adam's thoughts as well.
You kind of touched on the one that came to mind for me, which I found it very valuable to be able to hear from various public health departments. And we did hear from, I think each of us kind of brought our own experts to the meeting. And I think that's part of how I felt really comfortable that we were getting good guidance from Tri-County Health, was because I heard the similar message coming from Denver Health, coming from Jefferson County Health, from Broomfield. I mean, they all seem to be going in the same direction to me. So when I heard so many criticisms of Tri-County Health, I just went, what are you getting at? All these other health directors have the same feeling. So that's one of the things that's really blown me away about what's happening with Tri-County Health. But
I think that is one thing, though, in looking at, there are counties and they have a certain kind of jurisdiction, which they didn't have very much in this in terms of masking and so forth. But that's where the money went through when it came through. And so we had to work with the county, which was great. We probably had the best conversations we've ever had with the Arapahoe County commissioners my entire 12 years. I never really knew them that well, which tends to be somewhat common for some cities with their counties. So I think while COVID has been sort of the impetus for developing a little bit stronger relationships, the possibilities going on and doing something that's significant for transformation for good over time, if it can continue, I think is going to be tremendous. So I think that collaboration takes so long. And you can't collaborate a whole lot. You got to think quickly when you're in a pandemic, and you have to more partner, but real collaboration and coming up with things you'd never thought about outside of, another group of people coming in is where I think this has the potential to do some things for the metro area and for the state. I know Jackie's very involved in transportation. Adam, you're involved in a couple of things regarding housing that could actually build on the muscles we built during this time. So I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Well, I would just say that's kind of the DNA, right? We were ready to react because we've been working together for so long. So it was really easy. And easy to say, even I might not agree with maybe going forward with this sort of a mandate, but we're all in this together. And it's going to be so much better if we just work together and move forward. And then 2, 3, 4 years from now, we can look back, take our lessons and say, that was the silliest thing ever. Didn't work, or that was brilliant. But right now we need to just keep going and plowing forward and think about what else was going on. So not only had COVID, but you had social unrest, policing issues throughout. homelessness increasing, affordability, skyrocketing in Colorado, in the metro area, and all these other issues that we couldn't take the time to stop working on, and trying to understand and moving new programs forward has been a key. And I think that's what's going to keep driving our region, is that willingness to say, hey, we have a lot of issues and there's a lot of need, but we can solve it together, or at least make a dent.
Professor, there was one decision I made that the region said that's just a step too far. And that's when I inadvertently closed the liquor stores and marijuana.
Oh, yeah.
He did what?
We were so glad you did that first and not the rest of us.
The rest of the city's put up billboards, open for business. Open for business.
Mayor Hancock, that was right when I was deciding whether to move here. So gave me some pause, I have to say. But thank you so much for all those reflections. And, I think a couple of things struck me in particular. Mayor Millet, you talked so sort of, I think, eloquently about the importance of civil discourse, as both Chancellor Hafner and indeed Mayor kind of introduced this session with. Mayor Paul, a few minutes ago, you talked about how the work that you're doing kind of runs across the red and blue divide and so on and so forth. And you also just mentioned how much layering, how many challenges have sort of come together in this really in a crucible that we've all been living through for the last 18 months. And that's all happening in the context of, and perhaps exacerbating, extreme partisanship in the United States, right? So how does this partisanship play out in the local government and governance context? In particular, Mayor Olsen, you just mentioned the relationship between the towns and the counties. How do partisan divisions play out on city and town councils and school boards in terms of affecting the work that you're able to do? And let me add one more layer on top of this already very complicated question. This issue of misinformation and disinformation that we're all struggling with and grappling with so much these days. You talked about how information sharing is such a crucial element of what the Metro Mayor's Caucus has been able to do. So Mayor Paul, I might start with you. Please pick any part of that very complex question to respond to.
Well, I'm glad I'm in a room with a lot of political scientists. This is your task.
Solve partisanship for us, if you would. Yeah.
Well, it's creeping more so into the local levels. I mean, I think you certainly see it school boards, and it's unfortunate because I think what we do is special. And it's really cool to see communities come together. I was in Buena Vista last night at a town council meeting for something, and just to see people caring about their community coming out and talking about a $3,000 grant for historic preservation. That's what this is really about. And that doesn't know those, the R&D type of boundaries, but we're seeing more. Denver certainly is a little bit different of an animal. And then historically, I think our county commissions were much more Republican, right? And so we ran on the unaffiliated or nonpartisan. And I do worry about that. I think it's important that we maintain that, but even just this round of knocking on doors for candidates or reading things online, are they an R or D, right? And that's my tribe and that's the way I'm gonna go, I don't care. And that's really dangerous. And I don't know how we reset that, but I think there is a link to the social media, to the misinformation. I really try not to utilize my social media, but it's so easy to drive people to it and to get information out, especially when you're trying to say, hey, there's a vaccination clinic or there's a food bank open. It's really quick, it's really easy. So it's a double-edged sword and it's very bothersome. And now we're dealing with, of course, the outfall of all the misinformation where everybody's kind of overloaded and everybody's an expert on one side or the other. So that was a lot to say. I don't really know, other than I'm pretty worried about where this is going to take us and what it's going to kind of turn out to be.
I think it's important that local government elections remain nonpartisan. I do. The county elections are partisan elections, but the famous potholes aren't red or blue. And there's this country. Who knew COVID? I started listening to country music. Don't even ask me how it happened, but I have 2 children in their 20s, so let's blame them. But there's this line in this song that just resonated for me, and I'm tired of looking left or right, so I'm just looking up. And I kind of tried to take that to heart as I make my decisions and as I walk the walk in my personal life, but also as the mayor of my community. And I'm really proud because I'm hopeful at the local level, there is trust in government. There is. We do get things passed. The city of Lone Tree just passed a sales tax increase. We are a very conservative Republic. If you just looked at how many R's and D's and U's were in my city, you would have said there's no chance that is going to pass. Critical thinking occurs. Like it happens. People understand. You know, you are electing individuals that critically think. If you just want somebody to make a red decision or a blue decision, just train a monkey to push a button, because that can happen. And I think our job, and I think as local elected, we are the closest to the people. It is the credibility, it is our credibility that people look to when they make decisions about whether it's a tax issue, whether it's that one just keeps coming to the top of my brain right now, but whether it's an annexation of land issue, whether, you know, what local law you may or may not be changing. One of the interesting things we also did during COVID was repeal. We had a pit bull ban, and I relied on the work that had been done in Denver and in Aurora as we worked through that issue in our community. And you want to see people get riled up, talk about pets. So, you know, these issues are irrespective of a Republican or a Democrat agenda. They're quality of life issues that impact people at their dinner tables. And I think I really strive, and I think the people sitting alongside me do as well, to just try and improve the quality of life for the people in their cities, and not just in their cities, in this region, right? So I am hopeful about the partisanship issue at the local level. And I am concerned about it as we move up the levels of government.
To build on what Mayor Millet said, and it might go back to what Mayor Hancock said too, is that there is this need to refocus, and local government has done all this sort of the roads, the bridges, the fire department, that kind of thing.
Public safety.
The public safety, right? The potholes. But because we share such huge human issues now, I hope that it will push us out of this Democrat, Republican, or right, left, or anything, because there is no one clear answer for homelessness.
No.
And it doesn't come from one side or the other. We know that because we haven't been able to solve it with, you know, some cities being all Democrat or all Republican. Nobody's been able to do it. So I'm hoping that those social issues will push us to another level of dialogue in the local area, because we share borders, and people don't know the difference between one another. They don't care. And so I'm hoping that that will keep us at that, but I might be very naive about it.
I think it's good people staying engaged, and that's not really us, that's you.
One thing that we do have a benefit of being nonpartisan is that people who are not affiliated with a party can run and be elected.
Right.
I mean, I know we have that in Sheridan, and we always have at least a couple independents, you know, on our board. So it's, you know, it's a place where people who don't follow one of those mainstream parties can have a voice.
Great point.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm glad to run for offices that are nonpartisan. And I think if you want to look and see how Americans feel about the partisanship that's occurring, look at the increase of the number of independents or unaffiliates, because that is a direct indicator that people are just absolutely disenfranchised. They're not happy with what's happening on the left. They're not happy with what's happening on the right. And I know a lot of good friends who have been Democrat all their lives, their families are Democrats, like, I'm thinking about being unaffiliated or on independent in this. And the same thing with Republicans. You see more and more people getting out of that because I don't want to be tagged either way, because we're not going to code my thinking. So the question you asked, Professor, are two questions that I'm very passionate about. One is partisanship is destroying this nation. It is destroying the heart of this nation. And people no longer think for themselves. They're doing things that would have been thought unconscionable in their lives 2 years ago. Look at January 6th as an example. Who would have thought that would happen in America? That's just not who we are. But partisanship is dividing this nation. The second thing you asked about is really the media and social media and the role it plays, which, by the way, I tell you, the next panel you ought to do up here is get some of the leadership in media, mainstream media, and saying, what the hell has happened to the devolution of mainstream media? Because, and I'm going to quote a great philosopher, I happened to watch this interview. His name is Denzel Washington. And Denzel did this interview that made me stop me in my tracks. This reporter asked him about mainstream media, and he says to the reporter, he says, let me tell you something. Your rush to be first has absolutely destroyed the integrity of mainstream media.
Mhm.
So the reality is you're competing with social media that has no guardrails. And the reality is, if you don't read the newspaper, you're ill-informed. If you read the newspaper, you're misinformed. And the reality is that we are now misinformed. I can tell you as a mayor, watching issues firsthand, and then seeing a report in mainstream media going, that is not the way it happened. That is not how it went down. That is not true and factual. Teresa Marchetta, my director of strategic communications, is here. She spends 30% of her time, I promise you, and she never said this, trying to correct misinformation that's been put out by the media. Because they're rushing against people who are sitting in their basement and tweeting out or putting up on Instagram misinformation. So, you know, and that hurt us during COVID. We are battling new spikes today, and people are unvaccinated today because of misinformation that's been put out in the media and on social media. Denver is going to move out of my administration, move to declare misinformation a public health threat. We have to do it. And we got to start correcting the information that's put out there because it is scaring people to the point. I don't know if y'all talk to, I've got young adult children. I'm sorry to get off on this tangent, but I have sat with young adults who are 20, 22, 25, 30 years old, saying, I'm not getting it. And then when you ask them why you're not getting it, their reasoning is so out there. It's like, where in the hell did you get this information? And you can't argue them because they have so much, it's already embedded in their mind. It's just how they're oriented. And so it's a scary proposition. And we're going to be battling this, whether it's COVID or just misinformation, whether it's racial tensions or what have you, for decades until we get it corrected. But I strongly suggest you get your communications department, say, we need to bring in mainstream. Let's have a conversation about misinformation.
There is another form, and you mentioned social media, but there is another form that cities really deal with that may not come out, and
Don't
that is
say it.
next door.
Don't say it out loud.
So, and a lot of people don't know what next door is, and when you tell them that is the worst thing in
Yeah.
my
It's like
life to
Voldemort.
see.
That shall not be named. We do not give it any legitimacy.
So, but it is where a lot of really, really local misinformation
Yeah.
happens. And it's so hard. Our communication people can't stay on top of it. And plus it's set up so that you can't.
Yeah.
You've got to have informants in it. So, oh my gosh, if you have neighbors using it for information, please tell them to stop
You
looking.
know, over
at it.
150 years ago, Einstein said, I fear the day when technology will overtake our lives. We will have a society of idiots. I have that quote in my closet. Because it said, you go, oh my God, how prophetic could this guy have been, right? And that's what I'm looking at people constantly. And we do it at our kitchen table, and it's just filling our world. I'm sorry, Professor.
No, thank you so much. Please,
But I
Mayor
mean, I
Paul.
was say, while we're kind of laughing about it, I think that, and I don't ever want to be fearful, right? But what's going to stop these trains from colliding? And I think you see the polarization is growing and growing, and things that good, decent people that we've all known, and you look and we're on different sides, and you wonder, how in the world do you see that differently? And until we figure out how to address that, it's just going to keep going, and it's bothersome.
And it's going to keep good, decent people from pursuing public service as well,
Yeah.
because they get destroyed, their character gets destroyed. And it's hard to try to remind them what Mother Teresa said, you know, you try to do good and people will question your ulterior motive, do good anyway. It's like, well, that's good, but until you get on social
She's Mother
media.
Teresa.
You know, your points about sort of the importance of critical thinking and so on, and as obviously as a university dedicated to the public good and higher education in general, that's a huge sort of element of what we can do and what we can contribute to the community. Chancellor Hafner's 4D initiative, you know, emphasizes character building and critical thinking and so on. And again, both the dean and the chancellor have emphasized the importance of civil discourse and as a means to civic engagement, right? And so the importance of having these conversations. I just want to remind everyone to please, if you would like to ask a question, to wave at our colleagues over here. They will hand you some note cards. I've got a couple here. I have one more question to ask, and then I'll turn to questions from all of you. And I also just got a note that we have about another 30 people on live stream joining us. So again, thank you all so much for being here with us today. I want to ask a forward-looking question and hopefully a hopeful question. we've talked a lot about the challenges that you all have overcome through the formal and informal collaboration that you've described here today. And I wanted to ask you to give us a sense, and perhaps starting with you, Mayor Hancock, what are the continued opportunities and challenges now moving forward for local level collaboration, given this sort of excellent collaboration that you've been able to build on over the last couple of years? And in particular, you all mentioned at the outset things like the importance of collaboration on transportation and infrastructure, on regional competitiveness, as you emphasize. So I'm just really curious to hear what you think are these opportunities for local governments to shape public policy.
Yeah, I think you just named them. I think the ability and our commitment to erase the boundaries between our cities and recognize it. And this is a great opportunity with regards to the infrastructure bill that just passed last week in Washington, and the president will sign Monday. And that is, as we go to deploy those billions of dollars in transportation, does it make sense for me just to plan and think Denver? Or should I plan and think those cities that border Denver? Does it make sense for me just to improve Colfax when it's going into Lakewood and into Aurora, as far as borders of Denver? So it gives us an opportunity to think outside those boundaries, and homelessness as well. I mean, Mayor Paul just turned to me and said, we're planning to have a conversation and look at some innovative programs around the world, around the country, best practices. And that's why we do those things together, so we can have a collective thinking. So I think when it comes to the things that really matter to people when they step out on their front porch, safety, housing, transportation, infrastructure, our children, education, those are the things that lend themselves to the opportunities that we have here. And I hope that this continues so that we can be a dynamic region going forward.
And I think he said West Colfax to Lakewood because he's excited about Casa Bonita. But so on the flip side too, and we talked about this when we were at our pre-meeting, I think we're also going to start to learn a lot of the things that we haven't seen. We know there's a lot of need. I think we're just peeling the onion of what we've seen happen with COVID and what's going to happen and what type of resources are we going to need, whether it's mental health. I mean, just drive down the road and you see the angst of people driving erratically and the number of deaths and certainly crime. So we got to keep working together on a region because these are not easy issues to solve. And I think we're going to continue to see them manifest themselves in different ways. So collaboration will be key.
Yeah, I did want to add one thing to that with Dr. Cog, the Denver Regional Council of Government, which is represented by all the counties and all the cities and a number of other people. In the last year, we have, as board of folks that are on the board, have really pushed for us to not just do transportation and aging, which is the area agency is also with them, but to think about homelessness and housing. And because it does interface with transportation, TODs, how do we use our land? And I think they're coming along in some ways with the cities that are trying to go forward on some things around homelessness and addressing that and figuring out there's already a collaboration through Dr. Cog and the Metro mayors. How can we pull these two together and do things that are much more seamless and less wasteful of our time and money? And that's where I think that's where the next best things are for this. The Tri-Cities, Tara mentioned this earlier, we have a group of 3 cities that have been working on homelessness for the last 3 years, and we met all through COVID on Zoom and just now have all 3 cities agreeing, fully supporting an action plan that's been well formulated, has research in it, a family research study and an adult research study, and counties involved. It's a plan, it's got to be executed, but it is well formed. And I think those kinds of things are popping up all over the city and everyone's sharing information. I think that's where there's some great things that are possible to come out of all this.
I think in part of the Tri-Cities effort, I think comes out of, has its roots in regionalism.
Right.
I mean, we recognize that Denver bears the burden,
And
you
Aurora.
know,
And
and
Aurora.
they take in the homeless people. We practically used to ship them over, I mean, and it's just not fair, it's not fair. And it's not fair to the residents either, because they could be longtime, Sheridan or Englewood or Littleton residents, and we just don't have the services. So, it's part of our responsibility to step up and provide those as a region.
An important
absolutely.
initiative that was undertaken during the pandemic was also, it's called Built for Zero. It's
Right.
to end veterans homelessness. And that is actually something that we received, every single county is now working towards that. And that was something that was really brought forth by the mayors and pushed up to the counties because Denver is a city and a county. You know, cities like mine do not get direct health and human service resources. We look to the counties to do that. So the Built for Zero is something I'm very excited about, but as we look to the challenges that face our region, workforce is certainly one of them. Housing homelessness is another one of them. You know, the cost of living is going up. And I think we have done well in Colorado because we have been able to attract a highly skilled workforce. We grow some of our own, but we benefit from drawing others into this region. Our ability to do that, to continue to do that at the pace we were able to in the past is being threatened by a number of these issues. And we recognize that as mayors. The economic development and solvency of the region is very much linked to housing opportunities, transportation opportunities, and then bringing good jobs that pay
Livable
wages
wages.
that
Mhm.
people can afford to live. And so I think we'll always work on those challenges together, and I think try and address them together. But you would be amazed at the things that we had a call today from our large retailers talking about crime that's happening in their stores and the horrific stories of things that are going on and the stress that those employees are feeling and not really getting compensated on any level that would, they are not trained police and our police aren't paid enough to do the work they have to do, in my opinion. But anyway, these are the issues. These are real life issues at kitchen tables that we talk about as mayors and try and bring solutions forward, not just talk about. What we do as mayors is try to bring solutions forward, which is why it's great being a mayor, because you can.
Yeah, I just thought about the one thing that is the greatest golden nugget and is quite frankly, a global precedence for our region that we haven't mentioned here, SCFD.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mentioned
She
it.
did, she
I
did.
said
I
it.
know, I missed it.
Yeah, no,
I
SC
mentioned.
yeah,
And the
the
third
acronym.
tier of it is really
Cultural
helpful.
Scientific Facilities District.
Thank you.
That
Oh,
the
sorry.
region supports with the sales tax and supports our cultural science facilities. And I was thinking, because I love Mayor Millet's Lone Tree Event Center, I go there all the time.
yes.
And just the fact that as a region, we support arts and culture, which is a
Yep.
$2.8 billion industry in our region. It's huge.
And I just learned that for every dollar spent on going to the arts, $23 come back into our local
It's
economies
amazing,
from
yeah.
that. There was just an analysis that's done every other year, and those findings just came out from the CBCA.
We get calls all the time from mayors around the country saying, how'd y'all do that? Tell us. And they come and look at it. It's an amazing thing.
Wonderful. I mean, what strikes me about this last part of the conversation is that, you know, we started out this conversation talking about COVID challenges specifically, but now we're kind of moving to opportunities. This is a region in which we have the benefit of really a growing, vibrant, booming economy, right? We would be having a very different conversation if we were a group of mayors from the Rust Belt, for example, right? And so the challenges and the opportunities kind of spring from that vibrancy, as you discussed, homelessness and so on. Well, we have a number of really wonderful questions, and I might just start with the sort of the most immediate and then kind of branch out from there. The first question is really about the current surge in COVID in the region. In Colorado, some of you mentioned Mayor Beiter-Fluhr when you came in. We were discussing the conversation about local hospitals and the sort of overcapacity challenge that we're facing today. How are you kind of collectively addressing this particular current moment on COVID as people are preparing for the holidays, preparing for the winter, and so on? What can we tell our audience about this?
Well, I think Denver might do better than we are, but I'm speaking from Arapahoe County, both Mayor Beiter-Fluhr and I are probably similarly concerned. We had a call yesterday with our Tri-County Health Department, and we're at 9% now positivity rate in Arapahoe County, but our hospitals, and I have two in my district, Swedish and Craig. Craig is a spinal cord and back injury, so that's not a COVID serving place, but they're very worried about it. Next door is Swedish, and Swedish now they're at their capacity. They're looking for triage. Today we were talking with one of the mayors, Mayor Cherry Hills, whose wife is the chief operating officer for Swedish. And last weekend, we had 20 people in the emergency room out in the corridor for the whole weekend because they can't move them up anywhere. And part of that is We don't have enough staff. Nursing staff has left the field and others as well, but we still have to deal with who is coming, and getting people vaccinated can alleviate that so that those who are having heart attacks or other kinds of major concerns can go in. And I do think we're going to have to do something regionally to make a difference, but I don't know that, I think people are worn out. The call was
Yeah.
not a positive one. I did not hear anyone saying they wanted to do something from all those that were on it. So that was not, maybe you can kick us in the butt.
Well, I think that we're spending a lot of time consulting and advising with the governor right now. And I mean, like Mayor Olsen and Swedish, we're finding our hospitals becoming max, particularly ICU. The reality is that 81% of the people being hospitalized are unvaccinated. And it's a very heart-wrenching reality, because this is something we could have avoided. People make decisions, you can make your own decisions, but the reality is that we have a lot of misinformation that's driving what we're dealing with right now, and it's only going to get worse. And we have breakthrough cases, but those are not the ones that are, for the most part, being hospitalized. People are going home and they're getting through it because they've been vaccinated. So the reality is that, we haven't made a decision as a region in terms of what steps we take next to further protect people. But the reality is that the best, quickest way to deal with this, get vaccinated.
Yeah. And that's where
One
we're
of the
focused.
problems that we have, we were talking about what your authority is as a mayor. As a mayor, I can't make a decision. There are 7 of us on my council, and I know I don't have 4 votes to go to a mandate to vaccinate, even for city employees. So we're dealing with even the city employees aren't vaccinated. I had 13 police officers out 3 weeks ago, all with COVID. 1 was a breakthrough, the other 12 refused to be vaccinated. That meant out of 78 officers, we're out 13 officers for 2 weeks that can't be on the street. Great time to commit crime in Englewood. But it's not a good thing. And how do we convince those who are choosing not to do that? That's the hard place we're in right now.
There's going to be some hard conversations. We had a call today with Jeffco, all the cities in our health department, and our Dr. Comstock's going to the board next Tuesday, and you could see some pretty severe rollbacks. And of course, we'll do this hopefully in conjunction with the region, but it's really painful to think about shutting down businesses or, these simple things. And so we're trying to say, what is our last ditch effort to try to motivate people to say, we cannot go backwards. We've got to keep moving this forward. And it's going to be a tough, I think, next few weeks.
Let me ask another tough question, that connects the local to the global. We all watched last week with world leaders gathering in Glasgow, the climate conference at COP26. There's a question here that asks, what can local level governance collaborations do, and what are you doing to collectively address climate change, both in terms of mitigation and in terms of adaptation, in terms of public policy?
I think no, it's a very challenging issue. I mean, let's own that space. So I think what my community, if we're going to just generalize, is probably more of an incentive market driven approach versus any kind of a mandate required approach. And so what I think we have tried and will continue to try and do, I think, is higher density. We invested in light rail, we invest in microtransit, we are putting in charging stations, we are planning to put in more charging stations. We're looking at the electrification of our fleet where we can, where it makes sense, and trying to, City of Lone Tree pays for trash and recycling services for residential, make sure folks know about this, make sure that when we look at our planning and zoning and putting in, are we making the most water efficient guidelines that we can? I mean, trying to give people adopting the electrical code that is the most efficient code, that's the most timely code. So really looking to the market to drive home the importance of this and demonstrate the value back to the community. The City of Lone Tree is never going to be putting mandates in for anything like that, but it's smart sustainability. I mean, it's going to save you money. It's going to, and I think trying to communicate that message is something that we absolutely try and do. I think regionally we look at it. I serve on the Regional Air Quality Council for the governor, and we have significant air quality issues in our region. And a lot of it is meteorology and geography. And, we could turn every single thing off in the metro region and we would still be in violation of our ozone standards on some days because of the transport that comes in. So I struggle with this issue because I don't want to turn everything off and I don't want to make everyone I want people to choose that. I want it bottom up, more top down. And so how do I struggle with that. How do I bring those bottom up consumer driven choice solutions that are going to make the difference, always moving towards the greater good.
This is where I think about being at the University of Denver because I think of the technology that we need to have created and innovation that needs to come on top of personal choices we're going to have to make and some policy stuff.
Yes.
But we need a lot more investment in alternative fuels and understanding what that means for large populations in cities and how it would work and rural. And that's where universities can really step up. And that's where we need to be training young people all the way through to get them to college so that they can be the brilliant people that they're meant to be to think up things. I mean, we did something, I'm looking out here to elect Mayor Kyle Schlachter, who just was elected last week to Littleton mayor. So,
All right, Mayor.
and our two cities, Littleton and Englewood, share a wastewater treatment plant. We call it South Platte Renew. And we have, were you on council at the time when we made this decision? So we actually burned the gases that were released into the air and we captured them, and it's in a biogas project. It's first in the state. I think it might be the only one still, I don't know. And we're selling it on the RIN market. Now that gives you this incentive piece, you know, that really can turn it around, but that came through someone inventing that, creating some new solution to something that was putting out, I can't remember how many millions of cars it means we've taken off the road in the course of 1 year, just by doing that burning. So we need so much more of that.
And I think Xcel Energy, which is most of our
partner,
energy
yeah.
provider, actually
They
their
are.
goal moving towards carbon free. What year is it? I don't want to say it wrong.
2050.
2050.
Yeah.
And I think there are advances that are being made there. And I think the transportation bill that was passed last year, significant investment in electrification of fleets and charging stations, and really moving if you look at where the market is going and vehicles, that really, is going to make a difference. The biggest greenhouse gas emitters in Colorado right now are cars.
Yeah.
Our mobile source emissions has taken over what was being produced for the oil and gas. So we have to think about, that's why Lone Tree invested in this microtransit. It's a shared micromobility option that to get people in sharing a ride in the city versus, those are the type of things I think local government can do to encourage it. Our business community seems to be embracing it. We built, a LEED certified building. We look to do that because it's smart. Our art center has a LEED certification because it saves us money. In addition to helping our climate. So.
I woke up this summer and on vacation. The headlines that read, Denver has the worst air quality in the world. Now, I've been to China. I was like, oh my God, what the world's going on here? And so it is something that lends itself to a more regional, statewide, of course, national work, and that has to be done. But I got to tell you, I'm proud of my city and don't mind bragging about it. We can be here all night talking about what Denver's done. But last year, Denver passed a sales tax that generates $40 million to implement what we now have just recently adopted, a 5-year climate action plan. Part of it, we created a new office, Climate Action, Sustainability, Resiliency, Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, Resiliency, to implement our efforts. And we have changed our goals from, this action plan includes changing from 80% reductions of carbon emissions by 2050 to 100% reductions by 2040. And we are implementing very bold and aggressive electrification strategies around electric appliances and building standards in terms of the use of natural gas and creating new grant opportunities for families who need to retrofit or need to change from gas to electric to help low-income families. And so equity is our North Star in that issue, because we cannot forget that not everybody can transition at the same level. You can't mandate, changing out appliances when people cannot afford to change out appliances. You must allow it to happen. But I'm very excited about the Biden infrastructure plan because the electrification is huge. And for us to deploy those $400+ billion as quickly as possible to electrify, to help people begin to afford electric vehicles and get charging stations out, is going to be huge. It's going to transform how we move about. Now, the last thing I'll say is the importance of and the expense of multimodalizing our streets. Cars have got to start sharing. You got to squeeze cars to the middle, make them more frustrated than your bicyclists and your pedestrians.
People in Douglas County are losing their minds right now.
I
Mayor.
know, yeah. And listen, only time my life was threatened, at least in my face, was when I was at a town meeting, a community meeting, and a resident was upset that we were putting bike lanes on the street.
This
But the reality
happens
is we
every
are
Monday
going to-
night.
We're going to have to transition. We've got to have
We
access
have
to
to
these
provide all
bikes.
of them.
Yeah, we got
All of them.
everybody's
We have
gotta
to have
get it.
place for
Yeah.
cars and we have to have place for bikes.
to get. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Share the streets,
Yeah.
but give people the alternative.
Mayor Paul, anything
I
else?
would just say, you know, when the previous president pulled out of Paris, I don't think any city pulled out,
Right.
right? And that was the great thing to realize, that we can just keep pushing forward. And while we need a national presence, we have the ability. And just, you know, these are all big things, these big projects, but a simple thing that started in Lakewood was the Sustainable Neighborhoods program, which is now moved into Denver. It's in Fort Collins. It's just bringing neighbors together to talk about what can they do in their own neighborhoods. And the beautiful part about that is neighbors knowing neighbors just helps with the whole sustainability of a
And
community
safety.
and everything that goes along with it. So these folks, it's bottom up.
Mhm.
They're looking at projects that are meaningful to them and their specific neighborhoods. So I think we have great opportunities to address this and just continue to chip away at it.
Fantastic. I mean, that provides me a perfect segue into the final question. We've only got a few minutes left here. The University of Denver is incredibly proud to be your neighbor. And I want to ask a question about all the students that we have here, the community that we have here who are all interested in public policy, especially at Corbell, but across the campus. What advice would you give our students who are interested in working in public policy and trying to create a better world for policy? And how can we at DU support you in your mission of elevating the lives of people in and around the Denver metro area? Mayor Olsen, would you like to start?
I have lots of ideas.
I mean, you get to go last.
I'll go last, or you can let me go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's been valuable for my city. We're a very small city. We're only 6,500 residents. Our annual budget's only about $10 million. So for us to have an intern from DU is a huge thing, you know? It's amazing.
do that.
We don't have, to go to the last question, we don't have anyone on staff devoted to sustainability. So, you know, if we had someone just to come in and even look at what our current goals are and, you know, what we could do in Sheridan, something like that would be huge for us, you know?
Wonderful.
We need great people to engage on every level, from a water board to a mayor to there's so many different opportunities to serve, and we really need good folks. And I'll say we need young folks. I mean, the next generation really needs to come in and start taking this over. And so I would encourage people to get engaged in their local level. And, you know, when we deal with big policy issues, it's great to have a partner. When we're looking at affordability or homelessness, I know we've partnered a little bit with one of the other universities in town, but you could be a great resource even to help, you know, educate the rest of the community, or to bring forth things that, you know, we might not even be seeing, right? The educational part and educating us to help solve some of these problems. So I think there's a tremendous partnership there that could be had.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Paul, and I know what Mayor Olsen is going to say in terms of getting involved. Dr. King once said, we can all be great because we can all serve. And that's a driving passion of mine. The reality is that leadership does not require an invitation or a title. And, you know, most of the great leaders we know didn't have a title, and they weren't invited. They find something they're passionate about and they show up. And the reality is that this world is run by those who show up and give of their time, their talents and resources. There'll be a space for you. And this is kind of the speech I give interns. The greatest thing I did in my matriculation in life was to do an internship. One is humbling because you don't get paid. And two, you get up close and personal with what it means to actually do the job that you may love to do. I was intern to a mayor. I sat in the same office I'm the mayor of today as an intern, told to take copious notes and just be quiet. My staff tells me that now. Take copious notes and just be quiet. But the reality is that I got up and close and personal, and I understood what it meant. to do this job because I was sitting there at 18, 19 years old, watching it in action. So if a young person, my message to young people, do an internship. Do an internship. And what DU can do, all the great cities, there are two things to look at. One, they're connected. And two, they have a great relationship with their universities. That's a great mark of a great city.
I think showing up could not be overstated. I really mean that. I actually met with somebody today who's interested in running for office in Lone Tree, and she said, "Well, what should I do?" And I said, "Go to every meeting." She's already serving on a board, but service. I speak to a number of engineers. There aren't a lot of engineers in public office. I just don't know why, but I really don't, because we're trained to problem solve, and so it was just a very natural place for me to end up, but I don't have a lot of my peer group there. And I love political science majors. I love policy, but please approach it with trying to solve the problem, not talk about the problem. And so showing up on those boards and committees and commissions are where you talk about solving the problem. And you bring a great wealth of knowledge about how it could be solved, but then let's get in, I'd say you guys need to partner with the engineering school and actually start solving these problems for us. I mean, it could make a huge difference. And the other thing is, not everybody can afford to be a free intern.
Yeah.
So what DU could do is kind of help that. And I'm not, whether it's through scholarships, through,
Credit.
that you provide the opportunity. That is one of the things that I struggle with, is that you almost have to be wealthy to be able to take advantage of a lot of these opportunities. And so if there's something DU could do in that space, I think would really make a difference. And it would also then attract a non-traditional look to, it opens it up to people who haven't seen themselves in that space. And I think that's another thing that is really, really important. And, but I think also just having things like this. So thank you for having us today. And, I don't get a chance to say it. This has really been very valuable for me. So,
Well, you've said some of the things that I've been hoping that maybe we can do, and I'm leaving office next week, and it's been hard to figure out how to play this role as mayor and trying to figure out what do I do with my students, even connecting them. And I've connected a lot of my students with some of you. I know you've had, some of you have had projects and stuff that have gone on because of them, but I think we have a huge need for a public service internship program. And I'd love to see DU start one, and I'd love to help get it started. And I'm thinking about it, not as public policy majors necessarily, anyone. I mean, we could use a communication intern in our Parks and Recreation department to talk about how do we get this information better out to communities and families that don't know what's there. It's almost a free service. We have a finance department who could use another set of eyes on something, a different way to think about something. Public works, they could use someone to help them develop, other kinds of forms of relationship building in the community when they go out and do things that drive people mad because you just swept someone's street and did it wrong. And we have so many opportunities for different majors and minors that could apply. So that's my hope. And I'll probably be contacting some of you to see if we can get something going. And DOLA apparently has money for internships. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Rick Garcia told me that last week. I'm like, okay, we're coming after those.
Fantastic. You've given us our marching orders. So thank you so much. And what an incredibly stimulating, enlightening, and inspiring conversation. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Such a pleasure.